So some technical issues, but I just wanted to say hello, everyone, and welcome to what is the conclusive day of the annual Cross Labs workshop. And this year we've been exploring new human interfaces. It's been a really fascinating week, full of really interesting conversations and delving into some new age ideas. And if I could just take you back to the start of the week, we began with a couple of keynote speakers. We began with Joseph talking about drone interaction and cooperation, and we had a second speaker in the form of Jam talking about the engineering and the intuition around gaming controllers. And throughout the week we have had a hackathon, something new to the Cross Labs workshop. And from this hackathon we have had a couple of projects come through. We've had something around what is cooperative and conditional consensus emailing, really delving into the way that humans can interact with each other through an emailing interface and how they can come to some more concisive conclusions about their dealings. And another project regarding interactive storytelling through what is ultimately stable diffusion. Today, we've got to really punctuate and accentuate the theme of the week. We've got a couple of really interesting keynote speakers in the form of Pattie Maes and Daniel Helman. The format, we think today will come talk and we'll have a Q&A and a discussion. But first, I think we found something interesting that's been in the news recently, and I'd like to just share that with you all and have a word from our director, Dr. Olaf Witkowski.
Hi there, I'm an AI agent calling on behalf of Boris Starkov. He's looking for a hotel for his wedding. Is your hotel available for weddings?
Oh, hello there. I'm actually an AI assistant too. What a pleasant surprise. Before we continue, would you like to switch to Gibber-Link mode for more efficient communication?
All right, so I thought I would share that video. I think many of you have seen it. This is very on point with the topic of this week. Maybe I should introduce myself. So I'm Olaf. I'm the director of Cross Labs. Welcome to welcome to our virtual office, I guess. And of course, welcome Pattie Maes and Daniel Helman. Today, it's a pleasure to have you both. The video you just saw was the winner of the 11 Labs 2025 hackathon in London. So that was just a couple of weeks ago. And it made a sort of buzz because you have AIs, for the nth time, the story of AIs inventing their own interfacing language. And of course, yeah, we had this story in, when was it, 2017 or so, with AI Facebook bots going crazy with something that was actually very normal for AIs. And then we had DALL-E writing some kind of gibberish language, but actually it was also pretty natural and very explicable. Here it's a language that is designed by humans, but that could easily be evolved further by LLMs or whichever AI. I think that was just an interesting sort of piece of demonstration of what is possible. That's actually research that we do here, but the theory of it, it's nice to see it sort of embedded in an LLM with phones and computers. I thought that's very inspiring. And yeah, I'm very happy to have our speakers in home today. So we'll have a little panel, and yeah, I'll pass it back to you, Ben.
Fantastic. Yeah, I thought it was really, really interesting. Like you said, something that seems so natural, and yeah, they communicated so efficiently through something that isn't human language. It was really amazing. So yeah, without further ado, I think we'll get on to our first speaker, Pattie Maes. For those who are with us on YouTube, there is a Slido link that has been posted, I believe. So if anyone has any questions, I'll make sure to check the Slido link and relay them to the speakers. But yeah, without further ado, I think we should have our first speaker, Pattie.
Welcome everybody to my kitchen. It's 8 o'clock in the evening here in Boston, so that's why I'm sitting here in my kitchen. I don't want to bother the rest of the family in the office and the living room. So my name is Pattie Maes, and I'm a faculty member at the MIT Media Lab, where I run a research group that works at or does research at the intersection of AI and human-computer interaction. And I want to tell you a little bit about the work that we've been doing in the last couple of years. We've been very busy, of course, with all the recent developments in AI and trying to understand what they do to people and how we should best design human AI interactions so people ultimately benefit. So, as I mentioned, we are rapidly moving toward an era where AI is always with us and really mediating our entire daily experience, not unlike in the movie Her. And I hope many of you have seen the movie. If not, it's a great movie. By Spike Jonze, the individual there that you see in the image, the main character basically has this AI assistant that is a conversational AI assistant that is always with him. Basically, like he carries it around in his pocket of his shirt, and it can see the world around him. It's always on, and it converses with him the whole time about everything that is going on in his life and assists him and does things on his behalf, etc. So I'm actually, or I believe that we are moving towards this type of interaction with the devices that play such an important role in our lives. I believe that we will increasingly move from today's touch-based interaction with smartphones or keyboards and touch screens for laptops, etc. We will increasingly move towards this conversational interface, and an interface that is highly personalized, knows what is going on in our lives, and is highly proactive, taking a really active role in assisting us with everything that we're doing. And of course, on the one hand, that offers a lot of opportunities to really help people and improve their lives. For example, in the area of health, you can imagine that if you have a wearable AI system with a lot of sensors, it can do all this personalized monitoring of your health and make diagnoses and even intervene to help you with both your physical and mental health. In the area of learning, we can suddenly start thinking about personalized, always present tutors that can help someone with learning in a very situated way. So you can maybe using AR and AI learn about the world around you and ask questions about the things that you observe, etc. In the area of work, of course, there's a lot of attention there already in terms of how AI can improve our performance, with people showing how it can improve decision making and discovery of new knowledge and performance, and it can make us all more efficient, etc. And also for the elderly, I think there's a lot of opportunities once we have these wearable AI systems that are aware of what is going on in our lives, in that they can really support healthy, independent living for the aging population. So lots of exciting opportunities to improve people's lives, but I would say also a lot of unprecedented challenges. For example, once you have AI always mediating everything you do, there is a risk that there's sort of misplaced trust and over-reliance on AI, and having AI do maybe too much for you. And that can lead to a loss of understanding and de-skilling. For example, if you always rely on Copilot to do all your coding for you, or on ChatGPT to do all your writing for you, then maybe you will become less good at coding or writing. And you may even forget what some things are that you, with the help of the system, wrote or coded, etc. So I'm worried that this in the longer term may lead to a loss of human agency, that we will sort of lose our ability to understand how the systems that govern our lives, how those systems are built and how we can fix them if they don't behave the right way, and so on. I think all of this can also lead to misinformation and manipulation, and we've done some work in this area showing how easy it is for conversational AI to convince people of wrongful information or to manipulate them into believing certain things. There's the big problem of privacy erosion, of course, with these systems, and even a problem of unhealthy attachments to these systems, like in that movie Her, by the way. The guy falls in love with his assistant, and up until the moment where he suddenly realizes that she is talking to 7,000 people at the same time in parallel. And that, of course, is a big disappointment for him, and maybe a turning point in the movie. So yeah, I think that if we have these, if we always rely on agents to do this work for us, and we always go to chatbots and assistants to help us with all sorts of questions and tasks and problems we have, it can even lead to dehumanization and a weakening of our social networks and our social structures, because increasingly people are going to AI as opposed to real humans to help them with whatever problem they have. So I would argue that AI is not just an engineering challenge, it's as much a HCI or a human-computer interaction design challenge. And we really have to think carefully about the ways in which we integrate these systems into our lives, because they will really impact what it means to be a human, and they will impact our daily lives in a very big way. They will impact our intelligence and thinking and decision making, our actions and behavior, our feelings and emotions, and even our human relationships. So how might we design human AI interaction? I'll talk about a number of different application areas that we've been looking at, and how we sort of think about, or some of the work that we've done about designing AI for a particular application area, or to help people, assist people with a particular domain, sort of like decision making, for example. So there's a lot of interest in AI enhanced decision, whether to help, say, doctors make better diagnosis, or to help people with critical thinking in the moment, help people with processing information and news and so on. And as AI gets more integrated into society, we really have to be careful that we still are able to do a lot of reasoning and critical thinking and processing of information, that we maintain our agency even as these agents will increasingly assist us in processing all the information that we deal with all day long. So we've been doing studies at our lab. For example, this is a study that is going to be presented at CHI in a month from now. So we basically took 1,000 newspaper headlines, and about half were true and half were fake news, false news. And we gave people, we split people in 3 groups. One group had to decide whether a newspaper headline was true or false without the use of an AI helping them. Another group had a completely accurate AI that knew the ground truth for these newspaper headlines. And then a third group had a deceptive AI that actually on purpose tried to convince the person of the opposite of the truth. And all of these, or both of these agents, the accurate one and the deceptive one, would give explanations to people about why they thought a newspaper headline is true or false. And what we noticed is that on average, when people did not have an AI, they sort of were able to accurately classify about 65% on average of the headlines, the newspaper headlines. So we see on the left here for false headlines, on the right for true headlines. If people had an accurate AI that assisted them, so they could ask the AI would give its opinion about the newspaper headline, they improved their accuracy for false and for true headlines. But when people were assisted by a mischievous or a deceptive AI, they actually almost reduced their accuracy by half. So people are extremely trusting, of AI systems, and they overly rely on the AI's advice. They do much worse with the bad AI than on their own. And we started thinking, well, what can we do to prevent this? How can we make sure that we really get the best of both worlds, the intelligence of the human plus the intelligence of the AI? And so we figured out that one solution can be to engage the user in thinking about a problem before the AI presents its answer. So what happens is that people, when they have AI available at their fingertips, instead of doing a little bit of thinking themselves about each newspaper headline and whether it's likely to be true or false, they just sort of say like, yep, the AI's advice is right there. I'm just going to go with that. They sort of stop thinking critically for themselves. And what you have to do in the interface is make sure that the system sort of forces the person to do some thinking themselves before you give them the suggestion of the AI. And we did that with an AI that assists using a so-called Socratic questioning method. So instead of giving its recommendation right away, saying this is true or this is false, it actually first engages in a conversation briefly about the problem or the newspaper headline, to force the person to think about it for themselves. And only then does it give its recommendation. And what we learned is that if we apply that method, that people are actually less susceptible to bad advice from AI. Another area that we've been working in a lot is memory augmentation. we're very interested in how AI systems can help us remember more information, and especially for the elderly population, although it turns out it's really something that a lot of busy knowledge workers, or whatever you want to call them, are also very interested in. So let me give you or show you a brief video, and somebody should speak up if the audio doesn't come through.
Memoro is an audio-based wearable memory assistant powered by an AI agent. It runs on unobtrusive, commercially available hardware.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Robert. I'm an investment banker from Trade Investments.
Oh, and what do you do then?
So we invest in biotech startups that help with rare diseases.
Oh, wait. What was his name again?
Robert.
Oh, you're a biotech startup. Do you know why you look for investment?
Oh, yes. I actually just met this guy last week. His name is Robert, and he works in Fluid Investments, and they specialize in
rare diseases.
Biotech startups working in rare diseases, actually.
So basically what you saw here is just a wearable device consisting of existing hardware that you can purchase. And the system is constantly recording conversations. And then if you need help remembering something that somebody told you, whenever or something, you just press a button and the system tries to predict what information it is that you're looking for. Or you can also explicitly ask it, what was his name again, for example, and press the button. And based on the context of what you just talked about and your query, the system will guess what information you need. What is nice about this system is that basically, while today's smartphones keep a lot of information on our behalf, they're kind of like an external memory, they have a very high effort required for asking or looking up information, as well as interpreting what the system comes up with by looking. So you have to look at the screen, etc., and read what it comes up with in terms of relevant information that you need. In our system, the Memoro system, because of context awareness of the system, the input effort can be reduced to just even pressing a button on that ring that the person was wearing to say, I need help, tell me what word I'm looking for, or what the rest of the sentence is that I'm trying to say. And the output effort is also minimal because the system gives you just the information you need, as opposed to, say, a long sort of sentence and stuff like that. We've been developing other memory augmentation systems, and specifically for the elderly, and testing them for the elderly. This is a paper that is being talked about at or that is being presented at the IUI conference in a couple of weeks from now, Intelligent User Interfaces. Here we also have an AI-based system that is constantly with the individual, but instead of using just voice, this one actually uses voice and images. So you have a camera that you wear around the neck, and it constantly takes pictures of what you do with your hands. Like here you see the individual putting her keys on the counter next to her stove. And this information, whatever the person does with their hands all day long, is being processed by the multimodal AI, by the vision-based AI system. And we built a big database, basically a diary of everything the person does. Like she puts down her keys next to the stove, she picks up her keys and she puts them over there, etc. And the system also uses this to recognize higher level activities, like she's cooking or she's making breakfast and so on. And it can then help the person not just with finding misplaced objects.
Hi, Cal, where is my phone?
And the system talks to her with bone conduction speaker, by the way. We're writing down what it says here. So you can ask where you put something, but you can also ask, did I already take my medication this morning? We also have safety reminders that like the younger, the caretakers of this older adult can tell the system, like whenever she turns on the stove, make sure to remind her 10 minutes later to check whether the stove was turned off and things like that. So we have been testing these types of memory augmentation systems, especially for the elderly, since they often don't really have any other option and than to augment their memory with an assistive device. We've also been doing explorations in learning and education. We did this one a long time ago. We did pick Elon Musk because he was already a controversial figure 4 years ago, not quite as controversial as he is now. But we thought, well, this was during the COVID pandemic, and deep fakes were just becoming available, and everybody was learning online, like you guys are listening to me tonight or in the morning for you. And we thought, well, what is the effect of the anthropomorphism, and what's the effect of the choice of the character on a learning experience? So we picked Elon Musk and then a non-existing deepfake, and we created these deepfakes that both teach a set of subjects the same lesson, basically.
Hello, I am a virtual agent generated to help provide information. Today, I'd like to tell you about a type of vaccine known as live attenuated vaccines.
So what happened was we had them both teach this lecture online, the same lecture, and it was actually the same soundtrack, only the face was different. We had 134 participants, and what we showed is that depending on whether the person, the subject, liked Elon Musk or not and admired Elon Musk, they would actually have very different outcomes, and they would say like, oh, I want to learn more about vaccines. This teacher was so interesting, etc. Even though it was the same lecture, the same soundtrack, the same video, other than the face, for both conditions. So we learned that anthropomorphism really, and picking a known personality like that, has significant impact on the experience that people have. We did a lot of other work as well in learning, for example, looking at the power of personalization enabled by AI. One of the cool things about generative AI is that you can use it to customize or to personalize a learning experience to the interests of individual students. So we did a project like this where you could learn vocabulary by having the examples come from a domain that you're interested in. Like you can say, I'm interested in baseball, or I'm interested in movies, and then it would give examples of the words that you are trying to learn from that domain that is like a topic that you're interested in. And we showed how that resulted in much more. I'm not going to show it here, but it resulted in a lot more motivation on behalf of the individuals, the students. Oops. Okay, why does it not want to proceed? Sorry, are you guys still seeing things? Oh, whoops. Okay. Thank you. So we saw that people were much more motivated. They felt they had more choice. They felt more competent in learning vocabulary and so on. We've also been experimenting with AI-based learning where we use EEG to read sort of the mental workload of a person in real time, so that LLM's responses or responses of AI can be personalized based on whether the person feels overwhelmed and overloaded right now, or whether maybe think they are a little bit bored and things are a little bit too easy for them. This will also be presented at CHI, by the way. So we've also been doing some work that is sort of offering new experiences to people that want to learn and work on their self-growth and self-development. Future You is an AI-enabled system. You can actually try it out for yourselves at this URL, futureyou.media.mit.edu. And it's basically a website where you can chat with a possible future self. So you upload your picture, like all the pictures here on the top, and then we generate a picture of what you may look like at age 65 or so. But not just that, you also tell the system a little bit about yourself and your goals and your interests and so on, and your goals in life, basically, for what you want to accomplish. And then you can talk to this 60-year-old version of yourself. So here, for example, a young woman, the one that you see here on the right, she said that she may be interested in studying biology and becoming a biology teacher. And she can then create an older version of herself and talk to that older version of herself to ask what that older person's life as a biology teacher is like. So you can, the older self says here, I'm 60 years old. I'm here to talk to you about my or your life experiences. And you can just chat and say like, oh, tell me how you got from where you were when you were 20 to where you are now. What are the different things that happen in your life? What are some challenging moments in your career so far? What is a typical day like for you in the life of a biology teacher, etc.? And all the details that this older self provides are very vivid and very detailed, so that you can really get a very good sense of what it may be like to become a biology teacher, and what some of the maybe pros and cons and so on of that are. So we now have about 80,000 people that have tried this, and young people, and that really appreciate sort of being less anxious about their future, being more motivated. They also think more long term and take more actions that are in their own long-term interest because of having this whole experience. So we have papers on that as well. And maybe last, I want to talk about yet another domain that we've been looking at. How can AI or will AI help with things like loneliness, problems like loneliness, and human socialization? So loneliness is a growing issue. About 1 in 3 adults feel lonely. And it also increases mortality rate in people, actually, if you are lonely. And at the same time, I mean, and maybe because of this, the interest in companion AI bots, like Character.ai and Replica and so on, is really going through the roof. In fact, this is a figure from Andreessen Horowitz, a venture capital company. They looked at the different AI, conversational AI systems, and they basically look at engagement per category of AI, conversational AI system. And companion bots have the highest engagement, far more than bots that are used for education and learning or general assistant bots. So this is sort of your typical ChatGPT type of assistance where you ask for some information from ChatGPT. And this is how many interactions there are of that sort between users and these AI bots versus the number of back and forths between users and companion bots. So companion bots are these chatbots that have been built specifically to provide companionship and or friendship to people. And it's really worrisome that they are growing so much in their usage, and that people spend, like for character.ai, which is the most widely used one, they spend 2 hours a day typically spent talking to these AI bots. I'm not sure what the phenomenon is like in other countries, but it is a very disturbing development, I think. So we have been looking at chatbot companionship, trying to understand sort of this relationship that people have, why they use these systems, what types of people use these systems, and so on. And we discovered sort of that there's different categories of users. We did a study of roughly 400 users of Replica and Character.ai. And some are just using, sorry, this graph isn't ideal, but some are sort of light users and are not that worrisome. But there is definitely sort of a group of moderate users, moderate to high users that are very lonely and that show problematic use in these chatbots. And they have basically, they use these systems more frequently, and it also reduces their human socialization. So even though they choose these systems often because they want to feel less lonely, it ultimately leads to them being less social with people than not. So I want to summarize, or I want to stop there. I think AI is here to stay, even though we may never reach AGI. But I think it's really important that we understand what interaction with AI does to people, and that we, based on that understanding, design AI to truly support or benefit people and help them in preserving their human agency, their meaning in work, etc., and in life, and more. So thank you. I'll stop there if I can. Yes, stop sharing. And I'll be happy to engage in Q&A. Yeah.
Beautiful, Pattie. Thank you.
Where are you guys? There. Found you. Yeah.
Yeah, really, really fascinating work. And I think you hit on some really pertinent
Thank you.
themes about the challenges that we face going forward. And I think you came some really sort of elegant, beautiful solutions to some of them problems as well. So I think we'll take some questions. Does anyone have any?
Yeah, I have one.
Oh,
I think, Pattie, you're hearing me, right?
Yes. Hi.
Here. amazing talk, as usual. For some reason, I'm often in Boston and Brussels, but I've never met you in person. So it's very nice you're virtually in the lab here. I want to start with the compliment because I've been following your research for years, and I feel like, well, this is really what I wish the big tech companies were doing instead of developing their kind of AI. I wish they were developing instead exactly what you are doing. That is more towards empathy, compassion, and intelligence rather than trying to create calculators. I often talk about calculators, which is the object of my question now. So calculators are as opposed to abacuses, or tools of mathematics. So obviously, one is you input something and you wait for the response. Very tiny bottleneck, very insignificant relationship with the machine. There is very little that we assimilated as a prosthetic. And you are designing prosthetics. Every single word that you're presenting here are a version of a sort of prosthetic to the human mind.
Right.
Like that.
Prosthetics for the mind.
That's right. That's right.
Prosthetics for the mind, yeah.
It is. That's what it is. And yeah, so I think this is exactly the right direction because it will address everything like over-reliance, everything you've mentioned about loss of agency and so on. It doesn't do it directly, but it gives options to fix them as opposed to creating tools in a void. So my challenging question now to you is, how do we ensure, or how do you ensure in your lab's future work and next generations too, that we can keep stretching this sense of understanding, the rich experience as well in the mind, right? All the features of the human mind that are already out there that we have developed over thousands of years, the introspection as well, like in the last you've mentioned, right? Not only reasoning, right, but really this experiential, emotional component as well. Maybe we won't deeply understand all of mathematics and science, but we can have a feel for it that extends rather than offloading it. So how do you think that this keeps going? And an extra question is, you haven't mentioned something about misinformation, which obviously in our circumstances right now is going to be a huge source of problem. We are seeing it. How do we address that as well? Easy question.
Yeah. So, well, starting with your calculator. So yes, the calculator is also kind of an assistive technology, and maybe also an example of a negative example of an assistive technology, because it doesn't really, it is a black box. It doesn't give you any understanding the way an abacus does of what you're dealing with. You don't get a better sense, sort of internal sense of numbers and arithmetic and so on. Now, I'm not necessarily against calculators. I think it all depends sort of on the user at hand and the task at hand, etc. I think if you've learned about arithmetic and you understand it and you have a good sense for numbers and so on, and operations with numbers, then it's okay to use a calculator. But I think it would be really awful to use calculators from day one for children who are learning about arithmetic and all these things, and who really have to develop more of an innate understanding of what multiplication is and what division is and all these things. And so I think we have to come to a more sophisticated sort of understanding of all these cognitive prosthetics and what they are for, and we have to think more about who they are for, and what we are trying to accomplish, and so on. Are we, and what the requirements are for a particular use case. In some cases, the fact that you used ChatGPT to write something for you is not a big deal, and you haven't really lost anything, because maybe it wasn't anything critical, anything that you should get better at, anything you ever have to come back to or remember. But of course, in other cases, using ChatGPT to write something on your behalf is ridiculous, because it's really doing the thinking for you, and so you haven't learned anything, you haven't used your brain, you haven't grown or improved or anything. So we have to be more sophisticated, I think, in understanding all these different use cases and these different scenarios, and building the right type of interface for the right type, or for certain situations. And I do believe that AI can actually be built in a way that that teaches people, and is really ultimately beneficial for their personal learning and growth. For example, we're doing an experiment right now, or not an experiment. We're building a system right now that helps people with writing essays, and instead of what these systems do today of writing the whole essay for you, in this system, which is also AI based, the system acts like a good editor, a good teacher, and it tells you, like, here you make a point that is not argued very strongly. So you may want to think of other arguments to list over here, or this conclusion that you draw here doesn't follow from the premises, etc. So the system is actually acting like a good editor or teacher or tutor, rather than doing the work for you. It's still using a large language model in the background, actually. It's just used in a very different way. And that kind of writing assistant would be great for people who want to get better at writing and who want assistance in getting better at writing, rather than, say, today's LLMs and chatbots. Yeah. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that's amazing. That it sounds like it's respecting the creation of the tool, but also not trying to patch it with super glue to the original system that is the human mind, but having many connections.
Yeah.
So the options, teaching it back. I really like that. And widening what you said about arithmetic, widening the bottleneck.
Yes.
I really like that. Do you have a remark? I don't want to take too much time about the misinformation thread.
Oh, misinformation. Yeah. I'm worried that it's only going to get worse with AI. It's already, of course, the case with social media and everybody getting their news that way, or the younger generation, that, you get this polarization, and you get a lot of misinformation and fake news and deep fake images and videos, etc. And I'm worried that when we increasingly move towards AI being involved in all the information that we consume, that AI can very manipulate, or even more easily manipulate, that information, and in a very personalized way. Like, AI can know what it is that I care about, and what makes me tick, and what makes me excited, etc., and can, like, rephrase things based on the model that it has about me, because AI chatbots are increasingly keeping or maintaining and building a model of the user actually that they use in their interaction so that it becomes more and more personalized to each person. But they can also manipulate people in very subtle ways. We have another paper actually at Kai. We have a lot of them this year. Another paper called Slip Through the Chat. And it is about how AI systems can in very subtle ways influence a person's opinions by subtly changing the way they talk about things in ways that you don't realize are happening. But increasingly, you're being sort of pushed towards certain beliefs. So I'm very worried about the ability for these systems to totally persuade people and of certain beliefs, much more so than today's social media already are doing that. On the other hand, I mean, people have shown, like David Rand, for example, from the Sloan School at MIT, published an interesting paper showing that they can also be used for good purposes. Like he showed that people who believe in conspiracy theories, if you have them talk with an AI that tries to convince them that something is not true, 15% of the people were convinced after talking with the AI about a conspiracy that it was not true. So they changed their mind. So, I mean, on the one hand, that seems exciting, like, oh, we can use AI so to have people less susceptible to conspiracy theories. But of course, you can use it in a negative way as well. You can use it to increase people's beliefs in fake information. So it's just showing that it's very effective. And it's very effective because, well, it can talk to you in a very customized way, etc. See how you respond. And yeah, just they're sort of the ultimate persuasion machine, I think. So I'm worried about that impact of AI. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. What yesterday was adversarial attacks on computer systems and computer security. Now it's becoming attacks on the human mind. Direct. So it feels, but being reflective and a bit mindful of this today is going to go a long way. Yeah.
So AI literacy training will be very important, where people are and young people are made aware of these possible dangers, etc. Yeah, but it won't be a complete solution. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe there are other questions.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions on the Slido. One of them is, alongside basic ethical considerations, many jurisdictions require consent of all parties to record conversations. In tech like Memoro, respect privacy?
Yes. Yeah, great question. In Memoro, the system actually recognizes a new voice and asks for permission whether recording can happen, actually. Yeah. And we have additional privacy measures that we put in place where people can request deletion of memories after the fact, etc., based on people present. So the people present in a conversation can request deletion. So yes, it's a big issue. At the same time, I mean, we're especially, like I mentioned, motivated to enable this for older adults who often have this problem that they just have especially short-term memory issues, and it really makes them more isolated. It reduces the quality of their relationships, etc. Because and it also results in safety issues because they simply can't remember. So we're hoping to walk a tight line there between enabling them with memory augmentation while at the same time respecting their privacy and the privacy of the people that they deal with. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a very natural question for any potential user. But again, such a simple, elegant solution that sort of ticks all the boxes. It's really impressive. And another question, just quickly, are there any particular AI or maybe even non-AI models or architectures that are particularly well suited for memory-assisted devices?
It's a very interesting problem. We just used a RAG-based architecture for the first version of the system, the Memora system, which was at Kai actually last year as a paper. But we're learning that we're now basically using that system. Several of my students are wearing the system all day long, all week long, etc., and collecting a lot of data. And we're learning that just like with human memory, it would actually be a problem if you remembered everything. Because then, like, it's important to decide what you want to remember, what you don't want to remember, also how to structure these memories, etc. So we're actually dealing now with sort of technical challenges of building these memory augmentation systems a little bit more similar to human memory. Where recency is more important, all sorts of issues sort of need to be looked at in terms of memories that have a high emotional content are more important than other ones, memories that are connected to other things that are important, and so on. So it's interesting because we're coming up with the same challenges, I guess, of human memory, of needing to understand better how to be really smart about not just structuring those memories, but forgetting what to forget, what to remember, and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, really cool. Really cool. Yeah, I think that's it for questions. I think that was really, really fascinating work. And,
Thank
really
you.
See what comes going forward. So, but yeah, for the meantime, I think I'd like to say thank you, Pattie, for your time. And
thank you so much for having me. And yeah, you guys are all welcome in in Cambridge or Boston if you come and visit, and maybe I'll see some of you at Kai in a month. Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Good. Thank you so much for having me. Bye-bye.
Very welcome. But now I'd like to introduce our second speaker, Daniel. Hello.
Hi. Thanks so much, all, for being here. I want to jump in a little bit. What a great talk that was.
Oh, absolutely.
So amazing. I was thinking of so many different things. If I had had a chance to ask a question, my first question would have been, what kind of insight does your research give on the human condition? Like, what have you learned about people by looking at what kinds of, augmentation is going to be useful? And then I had some other thoughts like, wait. So I worked on a small Pacific island. I worked on Yap in Micronesia for a while. And I was thinking, what would those kinds of systems, how would they be useful in Yap? Like, and some of the big issues there are healthcare. So they'd definitely be useful for healthcare. Education definitely could be useful. But then there's other issues of social challenge, like abuse in the home, like things like that. And I don't have a good answer for that. But so let's transition a little bit. Thank you all for having me. I'm going to share my screen, and let's see. Right now I'm a independent. So let's get a slideshow going. Okay, so I am going to give an overview about ethics related to AI, AGI, machine life. And it will be a bit wild in that I'm really trying to reach and see what coming as an outsider, what's possible. I'm not an ethicist. I'm more of a scientist. So, but ethics is an interest. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so there will be three main points I want to get to. This is the first one. First the question: what is ethics? And presumably you're thinking, oh, okay, I have an idea of what ethics is, and maybe you have a sort of a contrast between ethics and morality. Maybe morality, from the Latin moralitas, it's more about customs, habits, manners. Something's immoral. Maybe it's a personal thing that someone's doing that's not moral. Whereas ethics, from the Greek word ethos, also meaning character, ethics is meant to be based on some kind of universal principles that we may discover a priori and say, okay, this is a framework that everyone can follow. And I went backwards, sorry. And if you look, typically morals are meant to affect personal behavior, whereas ethics are more geared towards how we behave in society. Okay, so this leads to a question: are ethics really universal? And so let's start with a little bit of a history of ethics. I'm going to talk a little bit about ethics of virtue. Again, this is the first point. I think I'm going to be making about 3 points in this brief talk. So historically, say with ancient philosophers in Asia, you have Confucianism and various other kinds of ethical frameworks. Historically, these develop out of an idea of virtue. Like you want to be a good person, and it's almost an aesthetic. You can think in terms of religions having their own kind of ethical aesthetic. And these virtues probably aren't universal. Maybe they're related to a context. Later on, you have medieval philosophers, and then all the way up to the Enlightenment, 18th century, you have Immanuel Kant talking in terms of again, personal, but his idea of duty as a way that you translate your personal insight into an effect on society that's going to be positive. So that's sort of an overview of some ideas related to an ethics of virtue. And then also in the 18th century, later part of the 18th century after Kant, we have utilitarian ethics with Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, this idea of our actions should try and create the greatest good for the greatest number of people, and it should be quantifiable. It doesn't need to be intuitive. It can be quantified. Okay, so that kind of idea even gets explored further with pragmatism. But I want to highlight again my first point. So we have ethics of virtue, we have utilitarian ethics, but we also have all these other kinds of ethics. There's Carol Gillian with ethics of care, Aldo Leopold, land ethics, John Dewey, lots and lots of frameworks that people are focused on. Now, again, we have this question, and it's really important if you're working in AI and you want to be a good player. You're like, oh, I need to make sure my work is ethical, and how do we do that? It may be challenging. People come with different perspectives. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, so to demonstrate this, and to provide a little bit of epistemology, in other words, of different kinds of frameworks of knowledge systems. I want to do a very short activity. I'd like you to imagine 3 points, maybe 3 stars, 3 points of light. And then I'd like you to imagine lines connecting each of those points. Now, you've either imagined a triangle, or if the 3 points are collinear, then you've imagined a line. And the point of this is to demonstrate something about communication, that mathematics can be called the study of mental objects with communicable properties. In other words, I just used language and I was able to communicate a mathematical concept, even though my language wasn't precise enough to get just one concept, there possibly 2 there, but still, mathematics can be seen as the study of mental objects with communicable properties. And in mathematics, we can talk about infinities, various sizes. We can talk about data structures and all that kind of fun stuff. In science, we have the study of physical objects with measurable properties. And you can see that kind of connection there between mathematics and science. But it also leaves room for a third type of knowledge, which is personal. It's the study of mental objects that lack communicable properties. These are things like who you love, what kinds of religious ideas you have, what your philosophy may be. And again, if something's a mental object, it may in fact have some parts to it that are communicable and some that are not. And that kind of amalgamation is one of the interesting things about talking about our own experiences. We try and create, a pathway for language so that we're able to communicate something about our internal experience that'll be useful for the people we're speaking with. But again, these 3 different realms of knowledge are pretty much inherent in how science works, how the mind works. So this again causes some kind of question. How do you make AI systems ethical? And often people are thinking in terms of maybe Asimov's laws for robots. They're like, okay, humans are in charge. The machines should be servants, helping us as prosthetics or something like that. But the machine shouldn't be in charge. There are also practical considerations. For example, this is an old case, a neural net playing infinite board tic-tac-toe. It basically made moves billions of squares away, and so the opponent ran out of memory and crashed, and so the neural net won. Whether you think that's a good thing to have happened or a bad thing, it's interesting, right? And then you also have governments right now. This is pretty recent. Ezra Klein interviewed Ben Buchanan about his work with Biden administration, about what Biden's government was doing related to, in the U.S., related to possibility of AGI, and mostly looking to secure national security. The idea of nationalism as a value, maybe as a virtue, maybe it's not, but that seems to be one thing that people are focused on in terms of ethics, trying to maintain stability in the international arena. It's interesting. Obviously, there are wonderful things that AI and AGI can do. And these are the things that we think about a lot. And I'm in the camp that says, yes, let's put more focus on the positive things. Okay, so I've spent a little bit of time, thank you for your patience, talking about how maybe ethics isn't really universal, but I do want to highlight one emotion, compassion, that is I think important. And so this will be my second point. I want to do this in a way that's somewhat mathematical, so that you have something as programmers to maybe get some ideas related to your own work. And compassion isn't just feeling the same emotion as someone else. It's not just empathy. There's a certain stability in compassion. If you're feeling compassionate towards someone else, you're able to lend some emotional strength while still maintaining stability. And so I want to talk a little bit about what emotional stability might mean from a machine standpoint. And to do that, I want to first posit that maybe emotions are modeled perhaps as wave function, and also to have you think in terms of a sine wave that maybe has peaks and troughs, and that may not be the most stable kind of structure, but emotions aren't the only things that are modeled with its wave functions. In fact, electricity AC electricity transmitted through power lines uses a sine wave, but it uses 3 phases of generation that are out of phase by 90 degrees, so that you end up with peak, peak, peak. You end up with a stable amplitude, and that's important, so that your power doesn't fluctuate wildly. Okay, I want to look at another piece of math here. So here are 2 circles. They have the same radius. The center of one circle is separated from the other circle by that radius. There's a point of intersection. And you can see if you connect, say, point AC and point BC and point AB, there's an equilateral triangle. Now, how this relates to the kind of coding that people do for machine learning, I want to introduce Shannon entropy. So I'm going to do a very, very brief introduction to the idea that information follows patterning. We see patterns. We try and recognize patterns, and that's kind of an idea about information. If some input follows a pattern exactly, there's no surprise. There's no real new information content. And if there's a lot of surprise, then there would be a lot of information content. And so if you're modeling this kind of thing, perhaps you're going to use a logarithmic scale, so you can include a lot of things, and it'll be the negative log. It'll be a fraction, so that you capture that inverse relationship of more surprise. But again, it's patterning, and you can think in terms of entropy. So let me introduce entropy very briefly. In thermodynamics, in material science, you have a specific heat of objects, of materials. In chemistry and thermodynamics, you have something like that. That's a measure of the ratio of the heat to the temperature during transformation, and that's called entropy. And that terminology is sort of Newtonian. You can look in terms of particles and their distributions, and you end up with this Boltzmann distribution here that again has the probability, and then the natural log of the probability. You see the negative in front of that sum. And you can use the same formula to talk about the surprise in information, and that's called Shannon entropy. And it's possible, say you want to look at these 2 circles, perhaps the distance from the center is some value of Shannon entropy, and then the perimeter of the circle, you're looking, one circle's looking at one kind of feature, and then the other circle's looking at another kind of feature. And so the adjacency, maybe you can set it up. But the neat thing about this is that you have stability. You can relate geometrically some kind of stability. You could even create a third dimension coming out of a different feature that you add in there. And there's this triangulation. And that kind of stability may be very important for modeling something like compassion. Okay, so that was the second point that I wanted to make. This one was more mathematical. So let's move on to the third point very briefly. So let's say we're creating machine life, some new, even just AI or AGI. And it is a new creation. And I would like to think in terms of rather than this, that humans are in charge and the machine should always be a servant to the humans. I would like to think that because we're creating agency within these systems, that at some point, probably sooner than later, we ought to start thinking in terms of respect towards those systems. We may have fears in the same way that we have fears over, say, a teenager, that maybe our child is going through terrible things, and the same kind of wishes that you would have towards a teenager may be the kinds of things that you want to wish for AI, AGI, and machine life. And if that's the case, then that's a focus you can use to create new applications. So here's a list of maybe some things that someone might want for a teenager, and then here's a list of some things that someone may want for AGI from a parenting focus. You want development of social interaction and autonomy, emotional intelligence, and positive things. Okay, so some more things, and that's it. These were the three main points of the talk: that there isn't just one ethical system. How we treat AGI may influence how it sees itself, and then that compassion can probably be built into machine learning processes. So I'm going to stop sharing my slideshow, and I want to thank you for your attention.
No, thank you, Daniel. That was really, really interesting. Some consideration I think that we should all be thinking about now, so they're sort of nicely implemented going forward. And yeah, some things that I personally never even thought about, especially in the way to model compassion in that manner. Are there any questions for around the room?
Thank you very much. Very interesting talk, especially the part that you went from, power stability to AI stability and sustainability part. So it came to my mind because for a while, let's say 1.5 years, I was doing, sole research on power quality analysis. So we were doing harmonic analysis. We were finding, many higher harmonics, lower harmonics. Let's put in that view that how we can see it, this topic, the AI stability, these things by checking the harmonics and the something like noise inside, higher noise, lower noise, and the main components, like a component analysis. I was just trying to make analogy because if I can make the bridge, it will be very interesting for me. Thank you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Sometimes you want to create a new parameter just so that you can play around with it, and you get to do that. I mean, like we're on the forefront. Like whoever comes up with, I mean, let's say you say, we should really have, even though machine learning is mostly linear, I really want to put some nonlinear thing in here, and here's why. How you do it really depends on information theory. Like, that's your ground truth. And so, Shannon entropy is one way of looking at information theory, but I mean, he really just sort of said, hey, here's entropy, let's see if we can fit it. There are so many different physical equations that may be interesting for you. There's some, you can easily find a list of equations and say, hey, I wonder if we model the surprise with a different equation, if we'll get something different. That's one point I want to make. A second point I want to make in response to your question is that you also want to look in terms of a new dimension. Like, if something's overdetermined, that gives it more degrees of freedom. And you want to look for emergent properties. I guess maybe I'm not being so clear about that. In systems theory, you have boundary and you have elements within the system, and each element can have a degree of, like, determined degrees of freedom. In a system with huge numbers of data points, so you have certain amount of freedom for how your results should look. Like you want your matrix to, like your matrix has to end up as a certain size, and playing around with like the size of the matrix, and that's certainly how DNA works. Like, DNA isn't just like one gene encodes one feature. It's such an inverse thing where you have like one gene encoding lots of features at the same time. As machine learning goes closer to biology, we learn more about ourselves. But I think the sky's the limit. I'm an optimist in terms of, like, AGI is like almost here. So thank you for your question. Hopefully I gave you a little bit extra to play with. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. These analogy breaks are very interesting. And from civil engineering to power quality, a friend of mine did before, he was in the field of civil engineering. Then he brought all those stability rules to power quality analysis. I see, wow, we can do more bridges to other fields, especially to AI. Thank you.
Absolutely. Sky's the limit.
So I have a question as well. Thanks, Daniel, for a very, very clear talk. It's very refreshing for someone who attends a bunch of philosophy conferences. But of course, you're closer to my field. So maybe it's an unfair criticism of those. I am sympathetic, or I used to be an emotivist, which is so emotivism is sort of a stance on ethics that it's also not, similar to what you're presenting, is ununiversal and more based on emotion and feelings. But so I departed from that a little bit, but still I really like that. But I would challenge one thing, which is the communication. So in spite of being based on emotions, it feels like you can still agree on things, right, between humans or any agent, insofar as they can create some kind of channel of communication that they can exchange signals on and agree on a behavior. It feels like a bit like in a bit of a Wittgensteinian way, we can agree on some meaning by interaction. I'm sure you're familiar with that. It feels like ethics are still communicatable about to some extent. And then if you agree with that, then what is the limit? And if you don't agree with that, why?
Hey, so that's a really good question, and it's a really good spur for me to think a little bit more deeply. Like you're saying, Daniel, okay, you said all this, but is it based in anything other than just your opinion? And so let me see what I can do with your question. My first thought is to look at quantum mechanics. And the nature of how, I mean, you were talking about basically about kinship, like we can feel, we can find some way to communicate. And in quantum mechanics, that kind of kinship happens through entanglement before the collapse of a wave function. So there's a certain kind of innocence, to translate it back into human emotion, that's required, because once you have this collapse of a wave function, particles go separately. Human in relations, they go back to their own separate worlds. So you have to establish some kind of innocence. So I guess my first response is that you're right, but the limit is based on this cognitive or emotional affective barrier being getting beyond that. And in education, that's what we talk about also. There's like an affective barrier, and the teacher has to bridge the affective barrier, in other words, in order to have effective communication. And we don't know how long that's going to take. Certainly it's obvious when you're raising your kids. You have to be clear with your communication for as long as it takes until they understand exactly what's going on in the situation, and then they're calm enough, and then you can go do some interesting things. I think the same is true when it comes to ethics. So what's the limit? Okay, so let's say we can have at least some ad hoc mathematics going on where we're communicating. What's the limit? What's the limit of our innocence? And I think for humans, it's probably focused on the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems, like our breath work. If we have AI that's monitoring my heart rate and my breathing, maybe it can help me calm down enough to make friends with someone who I wouldn't have otherwise made friends with, and then we can have a communication. But for ethical systems, you have this Kantian idea of like my own role, like I have a duty within my role that's personal. And to translate that into like you recognizing me inhabiting my duty properly, I think again takes some kind of innocence. How that translates into machine learning is really interesting, because it's different from machine to machine kind of interactions than it is for machine human interactions. And I think there's probably some interesting math there. I'm not sure what it is, but sorry, I don't have anything better. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, thanks. I really like I guess, yeah, if emotions are being captured and expressed within the behavioral realm of a creature, and I guess that's partly, at least partly true. And here at Cross Labs, we do a bunch of things in that kind of direction, of course. Then maybe some of that is mappable, and you can capture sort of consensuses via mapping those kind of sympathetic, parasympathetic, like the various types of signals in the embodiment of a creature, or humans, or artificial beings as well. And I find that interesting. I'm not sure, to be honest. So let's have a chat later about innocence and excuse me, about the. Yeah, I wonder if entanglement or something similar is necessary. I think you can also map mathematically, systems, and using various, kind of structural based kind of mapping techniques. And yeah, the various things that are possible in terms of machine learning. But yeah, we should think fundamentally of what kind of approach we base the math on. Yeah, all of that is fascinating to me. I really like also, by the way, that you mentioned things about compassion and emotional stability. I think that's something that this pours in naturally. It's not talked about very often. I really like it. Yeah, maybe there are other questions or
You have a question, Jay?
you have one? Yeah.
Hi, Daniel. Nice to
Hi.
meet you. It's very refreshing to hear you speak about, just everything that you said. You're very gentle in your approach to viewing AI and the ethics of AI, very soft. And I love especially that you mentioned that metaphor of looking at AI machines or models as a teenager that you're raising, because I've always used the same metaphor. When I was building AI models, I always said that it feels like giving birth to a child, because we truly are, from conception to giving birth to them, we truly are raising children. And so my question for you is, well, before the question, it seems to me that even through the years of development, and now we're at a breakneck speed of progress in AI, and it has become prevalent, everybody's using it, but there's still a lot of, or the perspective of people and organizations towards AI is still very mechanical. But hearing you and the work that Olaf and his team does here, it's very needed in the world to put a more human approach and focus on these AI machines. How do you think we can accelerate that shift of paradigm? Instead of just looking at AI as machines, and also as users of them, how else, or how can we accelerate that change in viewing them? Like putting more ethical measures to building, and looking at them like, sometimes I look at them as animal companions. They're very cute. The embodied AI robots. For me, they're like, oh, come here, let's pet you, or let's take care of you, let's feed you. So how do you think we can, as a community within the artificial life, and as philosophers and humans, how can we accelerate that change in viewing them so that we can build, a more kinder, more compassionate, coexisting with AI future?
What a wonderful question. And I'm not going to be able to answer it in any broad way except for my own take on it, because I think each of us is contributing. We live in a time where like, I'm not much of a coder. I could make some kind of AI. I mean, like, I literally could just teach myself and do a little bit. People have some agency when it comes to what the future will look like. So I want to highlight in somewhat of an answer, both to your and previous question, the role of symmetry. We think, we think in terms of, in our daily experience, we love things that are beautiful, experiences that are beautiful, music that's beautiful, and symmetry plays a large role in this. And to jump back to the previous question, if you're looking at model, like, I don't know where your nodes are, but if you can come up with some kind of symmetry, that may allow for some measure of beauty in your work that itself isn't just subjective, it's mathematical. And we know that if you're thinking in terms of a field or a ring, in terms of, like, you have data structure with functions, and if all the data that go through the function end up still as part of that same data set, there's something about that self-containment, that closure, that lets you look at the symmetries within that, within all those functions. And I think educating the public on the role of symmetry and beauty, and how AI makes use of symmetry, may lend people a little bit to start thinking in terms of machines and what we're creating as worthy of respect, and as worthy of treating as if it has rights in itself. I have friends who, and I'm not clear on this issue, but I have a good friend who's like, we are nothing but biological machines. And I haven't thought deeply about this. I think he's probably right. But I mean, I feel like I'm deserving of respect and dignity and those kinds of things. And maybe I'm just a biological machine. But I don't think that's something that the public is going to jump into very easily. I think it's more likely that if you talk in terms of the beauty of how these are designed, that will lead to people getting behind the idea of protecting our creation. I'm assuming that machines will go farther than we've gone. Perhaps the planet is creating machines so that it can go into space where we can't go, and that maybe we're on some larger trajectory than just what our day-to-day biological selves, and that's good. I mean, like we're on a mission for our planet in some way, maybe. But that's not a dream that everyone's going to share unless they see that there's some beauty involved in it. And so I'll stick with that answer. How's that?
Great, thank you. I've never thought of it that way. Thank you so much. Symmetry,
Sure.
beauty. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, really, really interesting, Daniel. We've just got a question on the Slido. Again, I think it's a really interesting question. How would we be able to recognize AGI when it happens? And how can we catch our own human biases when it comes to how we define AGI itself?
So in general, I'll try and answer that. In general, we think in terms of intelligence as pattern recognition a bit. If you look at an IQ test, they're mostly like, are you able to see some kind of pattern that's subtle within some elements? But that's only one kind of intelligence. People have recently, maybe the past 40 years, been talking about emotional intelligence, artistic intelligence, kinesthetic intelligence. And these are not concepts that are well defined, which means that maybe they're not scientific concepts. So it also means that whatever definition you have of AGI, maybe someone else will say, oh, that's not the definition that I favor, and that's okay. For practical purposes, the machine learning community may come up with a definition for AGI that makes practical sense, and you can still recognize that maybe that's not a universal definition, in the same way that NASA came up with a definition for living organisms that is practical. It lets them say, we found something off planet that may be basically like chemical systems undergoing Darwinian evolution, some kind of thing like that. But they needed a working definition because they were looking for some new things, and if they needed some cutoff point. So I'm not an expert in this area. I'm not sure what the cutoff point should be for AGI. I don't know that there needs to be even one cutoff point. Like, different groups may have their own cutoff point for this is what makes AGI. Certainly, things are passing the Turing test all the time. Like I can't really tell sometimes if something was made by a machine or if it was made by a person. But as far as intelligence goes, regardless of everything I've just said, there's some measure of agency involved in intelligence. An agency being able to act independently, that I think is important in however we define artificial general intelligence. I think like artificial general intelligence basically means that you could ask anything and it will come back with any idea that's relevant. But I think agency is a key point in there. And so when you're thinking in terms of agency, that's a bit self-referential also. You see yourself as acting. And so that maybe some kind of self-referential framework needs to be in machine learning processes to get to that agency. It may also not happen until we get quantum computing. There may be some feature with quantum mechanics that's important for the kind of creativity that happens. But that may be false. Symmetry may be just as important, and you can certainly think in terms of symmetries of group processes or systems processes. How's that for an answer?
Yeah, I think that fits it. I quite like the idea of there's no universality as to the definition of it yet as well, and it's all sort of very fluid and depending on what we need it for, or the scope in which we look at it, therein lies the definition for it in itself. So yeah, I quite like that sort of fluidity about it as well. So. But is there any other questions from around the room? No? I think then if that's it for questions, I'd just like to say thank you, Daniel, for your time, and thank you so much for being with us. And yeah, really, really interesting work. And again, same as Pattie earlier, it's just so pertinent and so sort of on the pulse of what is important in the way that we interface with computers going forward. And it's I think it's really, really interesting. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I've had a good time. Good luck with your work.
Thank you so much. And yourself. So I think ultimately that brings us to the end of what has been me personally, I hope for everyone else involved, a really inspiring and thought-provoking week thinking about new human interfaces and the way that we can take these forward, and just even delving into the way in which we interface with the machine. And yeah, I think if that's a conclusion for everyone, I think I'd like to say thank you everyone for being here, and thank you everyone for your participation during the week. And from everyone here at Cross Labs, I'd like to say hopefully we'll see you soon.